Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Lux looked at the grand fleet of the Alliance with a solemn look on his face. Today was the day when they would embark on their journey to fight for everything they held dear in their hearts and ensure that both Elysium and Solais would have a better and brighter future. King Azza and Kyoza were currently giving their speeches in order to raise everyone's morale because morale was important in wars. When they were finished, the two Dragon Kings looked in Lux's direction and asked him to give everyone in the army some final words. After his fight against Nyarlathotep, his standing within the Alliance had risen, and many considered him as one of the great generals in the upcoming war. In order to make everyone feel a little more confident about their chances in the upcoming war, Lux had made preparations beforehand. Opening his draconic wings, Lux flew in front of the flying fleet and crossed his arms over his chest. A second later, a giant skeleton king, clad in black armor inscribed with draconic designs, appeared behind him. The half-elf then landed on the palm of Deus Gigantia, who had merged with Avernus and his undead dragon army. The presence that the skeleton king was radiating was simply too powerful, making everyone who still doubted that Lux was the one who defeated Nyarlathotep rethink their opinion. While they were deep in thought, Lux's powerful voice resounded not only in the fleet of the Alliance, but also in the entirety of Elysium and Solais, using Seraphina's power of divinity. Today is the day we embark on a journey to face an opponent that threatens not only Elysium but Solais as well. I will not lie to you all. Our chances of beating him are very low. He is someone that even the outer god, Nyarlathotep, couldn't compare to. An opponent whom even the strongest beings in our world wouldn't be able to defeat in a one-on-one battle. Heck, even if all the supremes and demigods of our worlds joined hands, the chances of winning are still abysmally low. King Azza, who had asked Lux to say some parting words to increase their army's morale, was regretting his decision. Instead of raising everyone's fighting spirit, the half-elf was even lowering it, making everyone fearful even before the battle started. It was not only King Azza who wanted to slap Lux silly. Even the kings and emperors of their respective territories wanted to tell the half-elf to shut up and go away. But his next words quieted everyone who planned to stop his speech midway. "I see in your eyes the same fear that I felt many days ago," Lux stated, his voice becoming stronger and firmer. "I have thought long and hard on how to defeat Daniel, whose might far surpass all the foes that I have fought in the past. But someone weaker than me, someone whose strength was only that of a Grade D apostle, told me that I was delusional to think that I alone could save Elysium and Solais from destruction. All of us combined numbered in the billions, perhaps even trillions. So why should a single individual worry about these things?" The corner of Lux's lips curled up into a sneer as he scanned the faces of the people who had come from both Elysium and Solais to participate in this war. "Tell me, are all of you just extra baggage?" Lux asked in an arrogant tone. "Are all of you that useless? Damn you! Who are you calling extra baggage? Useless? How about you come down here so I can clobber you? Bastard! Just because you are more handsome than me, you think you can spout whatever bullsh*t you want. Come down and fight me, you scum! F***ck off." The members of the Alliance all shouted in anger as they glared at the half-elf, who seemed to be looking down on all of them. "Oh, for a moment I thought all of you were just useless trash who were only coming along for the ride to cheer me on," Lux sneered. "I mean, I don't mind having cheerleaders. You guys can just watch the show and see how awesome I am in battle." Naturally, the members of the Alliance didn't like the arrogance of the half-elf, and their shouts of outrage and irritation reverberated in the surroundings, making the air itself feel as if it was cracking. F***CKU. F***CK off. Someone make that bastard stop talking. Damn it. Someone stop me. I'll fight that guy. I spit on you. Pitchui. Lux laughed out loud as he pointed to his left and moved his hand slowly to the right until it reached the farthest flying ship in his vision. "As I stand here before all of you, so do all of you stand before me," Lux stated. "Who among you here are brave enough to fight alongside me at world's end? I will fight." Ethan, understanding 6227, shouted, "Hold my golden tickets." "So do I," Kingrig announced. "Magic castles? Consider it done." "I have been here since this story started," Chardwolf declared. "I will be here until it ends." "Thanks for the chapters. I mean, you believe in living dangerously," Jackin said. "I can see that." Lux wasn't the only one that had been fighting battles every day. The unsung heroes who cared for Elysium and Solais had also made their mark on history's pages and had gathered to support him one last time. In the final battle of his lifetime, the half-elf could still remember the words that 13 had told him before the latter pushed him into the portal so that he could return to his own world. "Remember this, Lux," 13 stated. "In the greatest battles of our lives, we are never alone." Looking at all the heroes of the world that had gathered to fight alongside him, Lux knew that 13 was right. He was never alone, and with these thoughts in his heart, he raised his hand high up in the air. "Today, we stand as one," Lux declared. "Today, we will show our enemy that no matter how strong he is, and no matter how many are in his force, he will fight us until the last man and show him that we will not bow down to his tyranny." "Yeah. So, raise the colors," Lux stated. "Say your prayers, for we will go to war. And we will win this war." "Yeah. What are your professions?" "Ahu, ahu, ahu." Lux nodded, and Deus Ex Gigantia opened its majestic draconic wings behind its back and took the helm of the Alliance to fly forward. Suddenly, a Bifrost bridge appeared in the sky, which would take them to the place where they needed to be. "Onward!" Lux shouted as he pointed at the road that appeared before them. "We make our last stand at World's End. At World's End. At World's End. At World's End." And with that, the entirety of the Alliance traveled the bloody path, which would bring them one step closer to the ending of a fairy tale. Lux led the way, and the entire Allied fleet followed behind him. However, just before they were about to leave the territory of Elysium, a series of notifications appeared to all the members of the Alliance, making their eyes widen in shock. Mythical Guild Invitation. You have been invited to join the Mythical Guild, Heaven's Gate. If you are currently part of another guild, there is no need to worry because this is just a temporary invitation and you don't have to leave your current guild. Heaven's Gate will become your sub-guild, giving you the benefits that all members of the guild possess. Heaven's Gate active guild buffs: 300% health regeneration, 300% mana regeneration, 300% stamina regeneration, 100% chance to learn skills from beast cores, 100% immunity to charm skill, 100% increase in experience points when killing monsters, 300% stamina regeneration, 100% immunity to charm skill, 100% chance to learn skills from beast cores, 100% increase in experience points when killing monsters, 25% chance of getting better monster drops, 25% chance of resisting status ailments, 20% increase in physical and magical attacks, 20% increase in physical and magical defense, 20% bonus success rate in crafting items. Heaven's Gate unique guild buff, epic rank. When fighting against opponents that are stronger than you, your attack and defense will increase by 300%. All the members of Heaven's Gate would gain the passive skill, Divine Abyssal Touch. The Undead Legion of all Necromancers will also gain the power of Divine Abyssal Touch when they become members of Heaven's Gate. Divine Abyssal Touch. Your attacks will be imbued by the power of the Abyss, as well as the power of the Divine, dealing great damage against abyssal creatures, ignoring their defenses. When the members of the Alliance saw this, none of them could believe their eyes. Even King Azza, Lady Faustina, and Lady Augustina couldn't help but gasp in shock after seeing the active guild buffs that were exclusively available to the members of the only mythical guild in the world. The members of Memento Mori all glanced at their sovereign with complicated looks on their faces. After the battle is over, can I permanently leave our main guild?" one of the Necromancers asked. "This mythical guild is right up my alley." The sovereign of Memento Mori glared at his guild member, who had just voiced out everyone's inner thoughts, including his own thoughts. However, since their organization was already hundreds of years old, he didn't want to disband their guild. "Don't worry," the sovereign said. "After this is over, we will ask Lux to make Heaven's Gate our permanent subguild, so we can continue to enjoy its guild benefits." The sovereign had a feeling that Lux was trying to poach his members directly by showing them such an enticing offer. Hirswith, who was with the flying bone fortress of Memento Mori, couldn't help but cover her lips to giggle because she shared the same thought as the sovereign of her organization. Lux was definitely trying to poach the members of Memento Mori, making them jump onto his bandwagon, ditching their old guild in the process. All the Necromancers were very happy with this arrangement because the guild buffs of Heaven's Gate were simply too broken to ignore. If their sovereign truly managed to convince Lux to share the guild buffs with them permanently, then all of them would all benefit from it. They all immediately joined Heaven's Gate, after which they took out their rarest beast cores, which usually only had a 1% chance to give them a skill. But since the guild buffs guaranteed that they would get a skill from the beast core they consumed, they no longer hesitated and consumed them all. One by one, the members of the Alliance accepted the invitation because even their own guilds didn't have such guild buffs. Just like the members of Memento Mori did, they all started to consume the beast cores in their possession to learn the rare skills that usually couldn't be obtained through normal means. "What a brat!" King Azza snorted before he, too, accepted the guild invitation. After doing so, he made an announcement to all the dragons and dragonborns of Karshvar Draconis to not hesitate and join Heaven's Gate, for this would allow them to become stronger in battle. Aside from the guild buffs, the 300% increase in attack and defense was very enticing to the Dragon King, who pursued strength above all. He might not be able to defeat Daniel in a one-on-one battle, but he was confident that he would be able to defeat everyone else. Kyoza also ordered the dragons and dragonborns of the Crystal Palace to accept Lux's invitation. He had been with the half-elf since the latter was just starting out in Elysium and understood what kind of person he was. With the addition of the guild buffs, everyone, including the non-combatants, suddenly felt their strength soar as the active and epic guild buffs took effect on their bodies. "Join," Eiko ordered, and her Boom Boom pirate crew also accepted the guild invitation. Flying alongside the floating islands of Karshvar Draconis, the Crystal Palace, Memento Mori, and the altar of the Divine Army of Light was none other than the floating island of Edia. There, countless baby slimes gathered, and they were continuously crafting one blast bomb one after the other. Glee, who was there to help condense their blast bombs, was smiling from ear to ear because she never expected that there would come a time when there would be numerous creatures who would share the same passion as her. That passion was none other than making things explode. Eiko did a good job, Glee thought as she happily condensed a heat-seeking nuclear-level blast bomb, which would be used the moment they came across their enemies. The baby slimes of Leaf Town had all decided to participate in the battle as well, surprising Lux and the Wicked Queen Slime, Lillian. It seemed that after the abyssal monsters attacked Leaf Town, these baby slimes understood that unless the threat was properly dealt with, they would no longer have any peaceful days in the world. Of course, the baby slimes that were being raised in the nursery of the guild headquarters were influenced by their seniors and also decided to fight alongside everyone. Lillian, who considered herself to be the protector of all the baby slimes, stood in the middle of them all with her arms crossed over her chest. With Lux's help, she had also stepped into the demigod rank, making her one of the powerhouses of the Alliance. The kingdom of Agartha had also joined the battle, occupying a few of the floating islands of Karshvar Draconis and the Crystal Palace, which were almost fully inhabited. King Septimius stood beside a beautiful lady, who was none other than his wife, Queen Bianca, who now had fully recovered and gained a new body with Lux's help. When he first saw the woman whom he loved with all of his heart appear before him, the proud and even arrogant king of Agartha broke out in tears. He had been longing for her, but he never expected that he would see her again. In fact, King Septimius joined this war, hoping that if he somehow fell in battle, he would be able to reunite with his wife in the afterlife. So seeing her alive and well made him very emotional, thanking Lux from the bottom of his heart. "Everyone, brace yourselves," Lux said as they were about to step outside the world of Elysium and enter the vast expanse of the void, where James usually traveled whenever he had free time. Guided by the Bifrost Bridge, the Alliance plunged into the darkness of the void, where the army of destruction had once traversed to destroy the dying worlds of the multiverse. This powerful army was once led by one of the gods of destruction, Surtur, who had met his demise in the hands of another half-elf in a battle that shook the multiverse several years ago. When I first met Lux, I thought of him as just a filthy lowlander who was only good enough to grovel on my feet and ask for my mercy and generosity. Truth be told, I was one of the Dragonborns who had a very big secret that I tried to hide from everyone. And that big secret was that I had an inferiority complex. Growing up, I could only watch as my brothers, sisters, friends, and acquaintances became stronger, leaving me behind. Many teased and even bullied me because of this, which further made me look down upon myself, further developing my inferiority complex. Fortunately, my two grandmas, Grandma Faustina and Grandma Augustina, stood behind me, making those who treated me like trash no longer dare to say it in my face. Perhaps because they spoiled me silly, I felt like I could use their influence to get back at those people who had once looked down on me. Sure, they were many times stronger than me and even better than me, but their fathers, mothers, grandmas, and grandfathers weren't as strong as the two Dragonborns who always had my back. This made me arrogant, and I started to use my position and influence to bully others and force my weight in certain circles. Everyone endured and tolerated my haughtiness despite being my better because of my two grandmothers who had decided to turn a blind eye to my spoiled actions. The two of them probably thought that I would change with time, but I probably wouldn't have, at least if I never met Lux. How ironic, I muttered as I drank a bitter ale that was handed to me by one of the most annoying green-haired half-elves in existence, which was none other than Gerhardt. What is ironic? Gerhardt asked as he looked at me with a confused look on his face. It's ironic that a side character like you managed to appear before this story ended. Huh? What side character are you talking about? You better watch your back later because cannon fodders like you are the first to die in large-scale battles like this. Oh please, I've already come this far. How can I possibly kick the bucket? I asked with a look of disdain on my face. I mean, my character arc had been great so far, so it would be a shame if I died in this battle, right? Right. Just as I was thinking this, the green-haired bastard snorted and sat on the chair in front of me. Acting so smug when you are just a Cephas, Gerhardt said in contempt. I rolled my eyes at the side character who didn't know his place. I then shifted my attention to the half-orc who was seated beside me and was also drinking a bitter ale while looking calmly into the distance. What's this, Flamma? I asked. You haven't appeared for hundreds of chapters, and you look like you're getting cold feet already. Do you want me to hold your hand when the fighting starts? Flamma, who had been staring at the endless void, glanced at me before taking a sip of the bitter ale in his mug. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can't see, Flamma said, talking to no one in particular. I was just about to tell him that such was just common sense, and how can one possibly see something when they close their eyes? But before I could say that, the half-orc continued to speak. My mother always used to say, the older you get, the better you get, unless you're a Cephas, Flamma said in a serious tone, which made Gerhardt start to laugh out loud. What the F***ck is this dumb half-orc saying? Was he implying that I'm stupid? Just as I was about to give the bastard a piece of my mind, two dwarf girls approached me, carrying trays that contained glasses of the bitter ale that I'd been drinking until a while ago. Do you want more, Flamma? Colette asked. I'm good, Flamma replied. I already had 2 mugs. I'll just get one later when I feel like it. How about you, Cephas? Colette asked in an innocent tone. That's S.R. Cephas to you, Pipsqueak, I replied in an arrogant tone. I'll tell my sister that you are bullying me, Colette said with a deadpan look on her face. Sorry, I was just joking. I hurriedly corrected myself. I'll take one of those mugs, please. Here you go then. Thank you. I watched as Colette and her friend, Helen, who was a cleric, continued their rounds to give the other guild members of Heaven's Gate some bitter ale, which helped improve their concentration and kept them wide awake. Although I had become stronger and could now back up my arrogance, there were still some people that I couldn't cross. One of them was Colette, whose older sister was Aina, Lux's fiancée. I didn't want to be devoured by black fire, who had the habit of taking the corpses of powerful creatures to add them to Lux's undead legion. I mean, I am strong, but becoming that half-elf's direct subordinate was something that I didn't plan on happening to me. Just as I was thinking about this thought, a black coffin suddenly appeared in front of me, making my body stiffen. Rows of text appeared on its surface, almost making me choke on the ale that I had just drunk. Sorry, but I have standards. I don't eat trash. Those were the words that Blackfire dropped before it disappeared to go who knows where. I pretended to not have read the words it directed to me because there was no way that it could read my thoughts, okay? Maybe it was referring to this green-haired idiot, Gerhardt, or this dumb half-orc, Flamma. If I were in Blackfire's shoes, I would not bother to revive these two deadweights, who would not contribute anything during the final battle. I mean, they are just side characters, unlike me, right? In the distance, I looked at another dwarf, who was also carrying a tray of mugs in his hands. He was none other than the simp, Maddie, who didn't have the balls to confess to Colette about his feelings. Like duh, everyone already knows that he liked her very much, including Colette, who seemed to just be waiting for him to make his move. Too bad he is a simp, I muttered before drinking from my mug. Maybe I should teach him some of my moves on how to seduce girls. While I was drinking my ale, I noticed that Gerhardt and Flamma were both looking at me in disdain. I returned their disdainful stare with a disdainful stare of my own. They dared to look at me in disdain? They are 100 years too early to look down on someone like me. This is why the two of you are still virgins, I said arrogantly. All you know how to do is fight. Aren't you ashamed of yourselves? Even Keen managed to get a cute fiancé. Bunch of puss *, yes. I laughed in contempt at the two bastards who put down their mugs at the same time. It seemed that my words hit a nerve. Well, what can I say? But the truth hurts. Be * cheese. But before the two of them could say anything, someone, who had been busy doing lewd hand-holding with his fiancée, approached us from behind. I heard my name, Keen said. Are you guys talking about me? We are, Cephas replied. Go ahead and teach these two doofuses how to get their own mates. Being with them makes me look bad. Keen blinked in confusion as he looked at Gerhardt and Flamma, who had both stood up at the same time. 2 against 1? I asked while the corner of my lips rose to a smirk. Fine. I want to warm up before this whole fighting starts. I, too, stood up and was prepared to duke it out with these two pansies, who could only play with their dongers in private. The origin of this chapter's debut can be traced to /n/o/vel/b/in. But as I looked at them, I noticed that they weren't looking at me, but looking behind me. Even Keen, who had just arrived, was staring behind my back, which gave me a bad premonition. Slowly turning my head, I looked at the farthest point that my eyes could see. There, I saw them. Just across the horizon, a long golden line, similar to the light of the sunrise, was slowly but surely expanding. I gripped the black spear in my hand, with my heart wildly beating inside my chest. The time has finally come, I muttered, and the bastards whom I both hated and trusted with my life all nodded their heads as they stood beside me. One by one, the members of our guild slowly stood up, their gazes looking at the same scenery that was reflected in my eyes. At that exact moment, I subconsciously spoke the words inside of my head out loud. I hope Lux revives me if I ever die in this battle, I said softly. If he survives, that is. That was my genuine thought as I gazed at the enemies that we would be facing very soon. My comrades also nodded their heads at the same time because they also felt the same way I did. There, in the distance, was the abyssal army led by Daniel, and appearing above this mighty army was a gigantic silhouette whose size was bigger than several planets combined. It was none other than the outer god, Azathoth, whom Lux had faced in the past, causing him to nearly cease to exist. I didn't know how I regained my memory of him, but after waking up a day ago, I finally remembered the person who had faced this same monstrous god, who was responsible for almost destroying the half-elf's home world, Solais. Prepare for battle. At that moment, Lux's voice reverberated across the entirety of the alliance. Even in the face of such an enemy, the half-elf's voice was firm and didn't contain a trace of fear. This made me, and those who heard it, especially my guild members, feel their blood boil inside their bodies as they prepared to face the forces of the abyss and fight with their lives hanging by a thin thread. I knew I should have stayed home, I thought as everyone around me started to move. The horns of war sounded, informing everyone that the greatest battle of our lives was about to begin. Daniel was quite surprised when he noticed the allied armies of Elysium traveling in the void. After bypassing the 13th layer of the abyss and reaching the first floor where the countless portals that led to several worlds were located, the pseudo-god didn't waste any time and looked for the path that would take him to Elysium. Although the journey would take him nearly 3 weeks to reach his destination, he didn't hesitate to take that path. He had already waited for over 100 years, so waiting for a few more weeks wasn't a big deal to him. However, instead of waiting for his arrival, the allied armies led by Lux met him in the void, which made Daniel wonder if they had already given up on their world and were sending themselves to their death. The two armies stopped their advance and stared at each other. They were 5 miles apart from each other, but that distance wasn't a big deal if the two really wanted to start their fight. Daniel looked at the half-elf in surprise because he was certain that the latter had been killed by his ultimate attack. Nyarlathotep wasn't able to tell him that Lux was alive because the outer god was busy asking the half-elf to spare his life. But, since Daniel had taken the liberty of forcefully taking the golden scales from the outer god's true body, he wasn't able to know who Nyarlathotep was fighting against. "So, you managed to survive," Daniel said. "Tell you what, surrender the golden locket and the golden anchor, and I'll let all of you become my subordinates. You will all become part of my glorious army that will conquer all the worlds in existence. I am also willing to spare Elysium and Solais. This is a good offer, right? What say you?" "I say stop spouting *T, Lux replied. "You talk about sparing us, while in truth you just plan to use them as cannon fodder for your goal to conquer other worlds. Only idiots and fools will believe your words." Some of the people of the Alliance couldn't help but lower their heads in shame because they thought that what Daniel offered was a good deal. They didn't know who the mastermind of the abyssal invasion was, but they knew that he was very powerful. After seeing the person in question, and the giant silhouette that was bigger than the size of a planet hovering above the abyssal army, they couldn't help but feel afraid. So the moment Daniel threw them an olive branch, countless people were already thinking of grabbing it. But Lux's words broke them out of their daze. No one wanted to die, but no one wanted to be treated as tools for conquest either. Although they might be spared if they really accepted Daniel's offer, they were still bound to die another day if they were sent to battlefields and treated as cannon fodder. "Do you speak for everyone?" Daniel asked in a teasing tone. "Aren't there any of you who wish to live? If so, all you need to do is come to my side. I promise that you will all be treated well as part of my army." Lux didn't make any moves to try to dissuade anyone from the Alliance to reject Daniel's offer. For him, those who would be enticed by such lies weren't worthy to stand on his side. A few minutes passed, but no one made any effort to switch sides, which made Daniel chuckle. "A pity," Daniel said. "I was really serious about sparing those who wished to join me, but it seems that all of you are fools who thought that you had a chance of winning against me. However, since I am merciful and compassionate, I will give you all one last chance. Join me and live, oppose me and die." Suddenly, a few flying ships flew forward and broke off from the formation of the Alliance. Lux, King Azza, Kyoza, the sovereign of Memento Mori, the sovereign of the Divine Army, and the other rulers of the land didn't say anything. Seeing that their leaders weren't making a move, more ships flew towards the abyssal army thinking that they were joining the winning side. However, when these people were halfway through their journey, a beam of light struck all the flying ships in a line, annihilating all of them at the same time. Eiko, who was standing on the deck of Poseidon's ship, looked at this destruction with a calm look on his face. Poseidon had fired its main cannon according to her command, and this was the result. "See?" Lux said in a disdainful tone. "He offered to spare your lives, and many fools believed him. Did he raise a hand to help save their lives?" No? Well, congratulations. Now you understand that in his eyes, all of you have no value whatsoever. He couldn't care less if you lived or died. Also, since they chose to join his side, all of them became my enemy, and all of my enemies will die. So, if you want to join his side, go and join him. I promise you that you will be the ones I will kill first. I will also prioritize killing the traitors, King Azza stated. You dare betray your own world? You don't deserve to live. I will also kill all traitors, Kyoza stated. It doesn't matter if you join Daniel now or later. I will make sure that all of you die a dog's death. The other kings and emperors of the various nations also declared that all traitors would be killed. They had already seen what had happened to the people who had tried to defect earlier, so they no longer considered doing the same. In the end, they realized that regardless of which side they joined, they could still be killed in the end. Because of this, they decided to stay with the alliance and no longer believe Daniel's honey-coated words that would only make them the targets of the entirety of the alliance. Well, it seems that the entertainment is over, Daniel shrugged. Shall we now fight for real? The pseudo-god laughed before raising his hand. A moment later, the horde of abyssal monsters surged forward like a tide, ready to tear apart the members of the alliance, who had chosen the void as their battlefield. Open fire! Great General Garrett ordered. The magical cannons on the floating island of Edia roared to life and unleashed a deadly barrage at the incoming abyssal army. Eiko and her Boom Boom pirate crew also unleashed their bombardment, which decimated the vanguard of the abyssal army, which was composed of low-ranking abyssal monsters. Glee had a devilish smile on her face as she sat on the special cannon that the dwarves had made specially for her. You're all bad monsters, but I'm a bad girl, Glee said as one of the baby slimes loaded a nuclear-level blast bomb inside of her cannon. So, I guess that it's okay for me to blow all of you up, right? With a devilish smile on her face, Glee pulled the trigger on the cannon and the blast bomb flew at the speed of sound. She had aimed it at the very back of the abyssal formation, where the demigods were located, making sure that her allies wouldn't be hit by the aftermath of the explosion. The abyssal lords already knew that the harmless-looking blast bomb could destroy an entire city, so they made sure that they evaded it like their lives depended on it. While the abyssal lords were able to evade it, the other monsters couldn't, and the explosion that followed afterward annihilated the majority of them. Daniel clicked his tongue as he glanced at the little girl, who was about to load another blast bomb into her cannon. He understood that although he had a bigger army than the members of the Alliance, the blast bombs posed a serious threat to his army. Because of this, he ordered the abyssal lords to all advance and target the little girl, who was laughing like a maniac as she fired another blast bomb at the rear of the abyssal army. This time, Daniel raised a barrier to defend against the blast bomb, but to his surprise, the blast bomb changed its direction before hitting the barrier. Not all blast bombs are the same. Glee shouted, "This is my special abyssal lord-seeking blast bomb." Just as she declared, the blast bomb targeted the nearest abyssal lord, making the latter cry out in shock. A second later, a powerful explosion erupted, leaving its target with a grievous injury. Glee knew that Daniel wouldn't allow her to continue what she was doing, so she activated the special function of her cannon. "Load it all up, everyone," Glee ordered. Immediately, all the baby slimes loaded every single nuclear-level blast bomb that they had created into the cannon. Once everything was ready, Glee narrowed her eyes and aimed the cannon at where the majority of the abyssal monsters congregated. "Eat this," Glee shouted as she pulled the trigger of her cannon for the last time. Boom boom Bakugan. Dozens of blast bombs were shot out from her cannon at the same time, spreading across the entirety of the battlefield. Eiko knew that Daniel would try to defend against her best friend's attack, so he asked Poseidon to aim its main cannons in the pseudo-god's direction. Just as expected, Daniel focused on defending himself, while the rest of the demigods and calamity-ranked monsters deployed their strongest defensive skills. The void battlefield shook as dozens of nuclear-level blast bombs exploded at the same time, sending multiple shockwaves expanding outwards from the point of impact. Glee's cannon was destroyed after setting it to overdrive, but she wasn't too sad about it because she had achieved her goal. At least, that was what she thought. When the dust cloud receded, She realized that the entirety of the abyssal army was protected by a shield that was coming from the gigantic silhouette of the outer god, Azathoth, who was floating above the abyssal army. "Shift to Plan B," Lux ordered. "Shift to Plan B. Shift to Plan B. Shift to Plan B." The battle formation of the Alliance began to spread out. All the Supremes and Demigods that were part of the vanguard charged forward, leading the army of the Alliance to battle. The barrier that was protecting the abyssal monsters disappeared, prompting them to meet their enemies head-on. The clash resulted in countless casualties on both sides as they poured out their hatred for each other. Lux knew that Daniel would not bat an eye and let the two sides clash because he was confident that he would be able to win in the end because his army both had quality and quantity. Also, with the silhouette of the outer god hovering above them, the morale of the abyssal army was at an all-time high. Even so, Daniel realized that, even though his army was bigger and more powerful than the Alliance, he had forgotten what kind of enemies he was dealing with. "Rise," Asmodeus ordered, and all the people and monsters who died in battle rejoined the fight as undead monsters. Diablo led the charge as he sat on his hell stallion, leaving trails of flames in his wake. During the time that Lux was sealed in the block of crystal, the Death Sovereign had gone to countless ancient battlefields and raised their strongest knights in battle. All of these knights were now fighting alongside him on the front lines, giving the members of the Alliance some breathing space. Orion, who had also created his own Golem Legion, was like a juggernaut that bulldozed through the abyssal army like a mad lad. Fighting alongside him was Shaun, who was known as the Juggernaut of Agartha. With 2 juggernauts and over 100,000 golems serving as the vanguard of the Alliance, their morale rose drastically. Ishtar, who had gathered countless undead archers, was raining arrows at the back of the enemy's rank, making them have a hard time. "Give them hell," Bedivere roared, and all the dragon knights that he had trained descended on the battlefield and unleashed a column of dragon breath at their foes, making them cry out in pain. All of Lux's named creatures and members of his covenant, with the exception of Avernus and the undead dragons that served as the Alliance's swords and shield, engaged the brunt of the abyssal army's frontline fighters. While this was happening, Lux, Kirswith, King Azza, and Kyoza made their move. 4 of the most powerful warriors of the Alliance all flew in Daniel's direction at the same time. They knew that unless they defeated Daniel, this battle would be impossible to win. Since that was the case, they would target their most troublesome enemy, hitting him with everything they had, and pray to the gods that the gamble they were taking would lead them to victory. Cephas had wondered what the end of the world looked like in the past. He thought that the end of the world would start with an earthquake that would shake the entire world, destroying all the kingdoms and empires that were on land. Since Karshvar Draconis was a floating kingdom, he thought that he would be able to see the lowlanders suffer as the land split apart, engulfing everything and anything on it. He also thought that volcanoes would explode, covering the entire world with ash and blocking off the light of the sun. He even envisioned fountains of magma erupting from deep within the earth and coming out from the fissures on the ground, extending up to dozens of meters in the sky. A hellish scene that was never before seen in the world would appear right before his eyes, and he would marvel at them before the sky turned dark and countless lightning bolts would descend above his head, destroying all of creation along with it. That was Cephas' version of the end of the world. But now, he knew better. Giants of all shapes and sizes rampaged across the void battlefield, killing everything in their path. Countless dragons, wyverns, griffins, and other flying creatures fell from the sky en masse as their blood rained down on the people below them. It was complete pandemonium, and he was right smack in the center of it. "Don't go too deep, Colette," Maddie shouted as he controlled his gyrocopter near the person he liked, who was riding her own gyrocopter, accompanied by Helen and the 2 baby slimes that were perched on top of their heads. "I know," Colette replied as she pulled the trigger, which unleashed several blast missiles at the flying abyssal monsters in front of her. Maddie originally didn't plan on fighting on the front lines, but when Colette decided to fight alongside her older sister, Aina, he gritted his teeth and hopped into one of the gyrocopters that was readily available on the floating island of Edea. Since the person he liked was going to fight, he would not allow her to fight alone. Aina, who was currently in her battle angel form, didn't stray too far from her little sister, ready to come to her rescue at a moment's notice. Cephas and Gerhardt were there as well, assisting the Gyrocopter Legion of Heaven's Gate, which were mostly operated by dwarves and kobolds, who decided to fight as well. The dwarves were composed of the riders of Noria, who had all joined Heaven's Gate in this battle for survival. While the heavyweights of their army were dealing with the heavyweights of the opposing army, the low-ranking combatants tore at each other's throats with an intensity that wouldn't lose to the powerhouses of both sides. Countless sword flashes flew past Cephas, slicing apart the abyssal chimera that had tried to attack the dragon-born from his blind spot. "Good job, Lowlander," Cephas shouted. "You're making yourself useful." Keen, who was riding on top of a wyvern, just gave Cephas a curt nod before assisting the others in their battle. Several clicking sounds reverberated in the surroundings as Keen flicked his thumb over the handle of his sword, unsheathing it briefly from its scabbard. Below them, a giant black boar, with flames spewing out of its nose and mouth, rammed and trampled countless abyssal monsters that stood in its way. The boar was none other than Kai's grandpa, Maximilian, who was currently leading the members of the Rowan tribe in battle. Not far from him, a draconic serpent, made up of water, unleashed a blue beam of light, annihilating the monsters, who were ganging up on the forces of Barbados Academy. Alexander was also at the front lines of battle, and made sure that he would be able to save as many lives of his people as possible. At that moment, something big flew over Cephas' head. It was none other than the Earth Turtle, who was responsible for maneuvering the floating island of Edea. Countless gyrocopters took off from this flying fortress, while those that were damaged during the battle returned to it. Several dwarf engineers were there to fix the damaged gyrocopters, allowing them to fight again. While this was happening, the magical cannons that were mounted on the floating island didn't stop firing, making sure that their base wouldn't be overrun by the abyssal monsters who could fly. Aya! 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 Countless baby slimes, who were perched on top of dozens of gyrocopters, kept throwing blast bombs towards the ground, targeting the bulk of the abyssal army. Cephas didn't understand why these weak creatures were participating in this battle, when they could just stay hidden in the underground tunnels of their guild headquarters, completely safe from harm. "Watch out!" Cephas shouted as an abyssal creature unleashed a breath attack on the gyrocopters, which were carrying the baby slimes. The Dragonborn raised his spear and used his gravity domain to make all the baby slimes, as well as the elders of Leaf Town, fly out of the war machines before they exploded after getting hit by the breath attack of an Empyrean-ranked abyssal dragon. Grandma Annie and Randolph were among the dwarves that Cephas had saved from the explosion. "Can't you weak lowlanders just stay put?" Cephas roared in anger as he went to another location to save some dwarves, whose gyrocopters were falling from the sky. "You baby slimes should just go suck the milk in the nursery and stay out of this battle." The Dragonborn was truly enraged because although he acted arrogant all the time, the people that were dying around him were members of his guild, whom he had also interacted with in the past. However, no matter how hard he tried, Cephas wasn't able to save everyone, making his eyes turn bloodshot. "All of you just stay in the flying fortress and behave," Cephas said as he flew towards the floating island to dump the baby slimes, dwarves and kobolds that he had saved. "Please, just stay and don't come out. We can handle everything ourselves." "Aya! Aya!" Countless baby slimes nodded, making the Dragonborn sigh in relief. Although these little punks were annoying, he had grown fond of them because they would often offer him some berries whenever they found him lazing around in the guild headquarters. "Hurry and go," Cephas ordered. "This place is dangerous." After depositing the baby slimes, the dwarves, and kobolds on the surface of the floating island, the Dragonborn was about to leave when a calamity-ranked abyssal demon hovered in the skies above them. "Die!" The abyssal demon unleashed countless purple fireballs that were the size of a bus towards Cephas, who was just about to return to the battlefield. Cephas' first thought was to dodge the attack. But, after remembering that the baby slimes, dwarves, and kobolds were right behind him, and would be instantly annihilated by the purple fireballs if he were to dodge, the Dragonborn knew that he had to make a hard choice. "Damn you!" Cephas roared in anger as he gathered all the strength he could muster to activate his gravity domain a second time. He then wrapped those he wanted to protect in black domes of light before sending them towards the guild headquarters in the distance. A moment later, a loud explosion erupted as the purple fireballs descended upon the floating island, which could have destroyed a fifth of it. But these attacks didn't hit the floating island. Instead, a lone dragonborn tanked it all, using all the life-saving items that Lady Faustina and Lady Augustina had given him. "Damn it," Cephas muttered as his body collapsed on the ground. Half of his body was destroyed from the explosion, and he could already feel his life fading away. "Lux, if we don't win this one, I'll haunt you in the afterlife," Cephas thought as he thought of the half-elf, who was currently fighting against Daniel at the very rear of the abyssal formation. Tears streamed down the side of his face as the light in his eyes disappeared. Even so, his eyes remained open, hoping to see a future in the afterlife where no one, not even the baby slimes who were all part of their guild, needed to fight ever again. Gerhardt's roar filled with anger reverberated in the battlefield as he unleashed countless wind blades at the calamity-ranked demon who had killed one of his closest friends. Cephas was fighting side by side with him several minutes ago, but the Dragonborn broke rank in order to save their guildmates from dying. Gerhardt covered for him and attacked those that were trying to aim at the Dragonborn, who was retreating towards their guild base to take their people to safety. However, there were simply too many enemies who were hell-bent to reach the floating island with the intention of destroying it. The green-haired half-elf did everything in his power to stop their advance. But, while dealing with several dreadnought-ranked gargoyles, a calamity-ranked monster took this opportunity to get past him. Gerhardt was unable to do anything because he knew that if he turned his back on the gargoyles who were attacking him, it would be his doom. Fortunately, Aina and Keen appeared to help save the green-haired half-elf before it got too dangerous. "Hurry!" Gerhardt shouted as soon as the last of the gargoyles had been dealt with. "We need to save Cephas." Unfortunately, when they arrived at the scene, it was already too late. Gripped by anger and guilt, Gerhardt unleashed his strongest attack with the intention of killing his target. However, he was dealing with a calamity-ranked monster. This was a creature that was only a level below the demigod rank, and the half-elf was only an A-ranker. Although he was considered a high-ranker, only saints could effectively threaten a calamity-ranked monster in battle, but he didn't care. Keen, who also saw what happened to Cephas, unsheathed his sword fully from his scabbard for the first time. Similar to Gerhardt, he was seething with anger, but it didn't show on his face. Aina, who knew what the Dragonborn was truly like, also decided to go all out to kill the calamity-ranked monster. In their eyes, Cephas was a very annoying comrade, but he was their comrade, who had sacrificed his life to not only save his guild members, but to also protect their headquarters from being destroyed. Aina's tendril-like wings turned blood red as her eyes glowed crimson. This was one of the forms of her battle angel, which disregarded any kind of defense in order to unleash her strongest offensive potential. Simply put, this was her glass cannon form. She would be able to hit extremely hard, but if she got hit in return, the injuries she would receive could kill her instantly. But she didn't care. This was how determined she was to kill the monster before her, to prevent others from becoming its victim. The abyssal demon snorted as he casually evaded Gerhardt's wind blades. However, he froze mid-flight when a shallow cut appeared on his chest, drawing blood. Touching the injury on his chest with his hand, the demon then glanced in the direction where the attack came from. There, he saw a young man holding a sword in his hand and riding on top of a wyvern, with cold eyes fixed in his direction. "Good," the abyssal demon sneered. "I will personally gouge your eyes out and add them to my collection." "Come," Keen replied fearlessly. He had unleashed his strongest attack, but he only managed to create a shallow cut on the abyssal demon's body. Because of this, he knew that he needed to get closer to his target to deal the monster a grievous injury, one that would take its life. But that one attack took a lot from him. At most, he could only use it twice in a row before he would suffer a backlash. Taking a fighting stance, Keen waited for the abyssal demon to come to him. However, The demon wasn't stupid. Although that attack was shallow, he felt as if his very soul had also been damaged as well, making him become very wary of approaching the swordsman, who was emitting a cold and sharp killing intent. Since he couldn't come close to his target, he decided to use range attacks to end Keen's life. With a laugh, the demon unleashed countless purple fireballs in Keen's direction, forcing the wyvern to evade. But the attacks of a calamity-ranked monster weren't that easy to dodge. Keen understood that if he didn't do anything now, he was going to die just like Cephas, and he couldn't let that happen. His fiancée, Rose, had told him that she would marry him after this battle was over, so he couldn't die no matter what. Filled with reluctance, Keen swung his sword for the second time, unleashing his strongest attack. All the fireballs were cut in half, creating an explosion that pushed his wyvern mount away due to the gusts of wind that blew in their direction. Another shallow cut appeared on the demon's chest because Keen made sure that his attack would reach him no matter what. Enraged that a mere rancor was able to wound him twice, the eyes of the demon turned bloodshot. But just as he was about to unleash another barrage of fireballs in Keen's direction, something red flashed at the corner of his eye. The demon subconsciously moved to the side, evading Aina's heavenly blade. However, the monster wasn't able to dodge it completely as one of its arms was cut off from its body. A pained cry escaped the demon's lips as he tried to retrieve the arm that was falling to the ground. Suddenly, something fast flew over his arm and grabbed it, making the demon roar in anger. Gerhardt, who caught the demon's arm, created a mini cyclone and shredded it to pieces. Blood splashed on his face due to the violence of the cyclone, but Gerhardt ignored it. The blood slowly streamed down on his face, making the handsome half-elf look like a devil who was out for blood. "You bunch of small fries," the demon shouted. "How dare you mock me?" This time, the demon was now truly enraged. He no longer cared and raised his only remaining hand to conjure a giant purple fireball, which was at least 10 meters tall. But before he could throw it, a pink-haired succubus appeared in front of him, making him stop whatever he was doing. Aurora's eyes glowed with power, as she used charm to stop the abyssal monster from moving. As if waiting for that moment, Aina and Gerhardt descended from the skies together. The battle angel used her sword to sever the monster's head off its body, while the green-haired half-elf pierced the chest of the abyssal monster with his dagger, piercing the monster's heart. With a twist of his dagger, Gerhardt unleashed a concentrated blast of wind, making the demon's body explode. Now that the monster was dead, he glanced at their guild headquarters where the dwarves, kobolds, and baby slimes gathered. In order to ensure that Cephas' body wouldn't be completely destroyed from the battle, Gerhardt used his powers to send it to the entrance of their guild headquarters, where the Dragonborn had sent his guild members in order to save them from the demon's attack. The baby slimes, who Cephas had yelled at earlier, were all crying as they gently nudged the Dragonborn's head, as if asking him to wake up from his slumber. Gerhardt burned the image of the fallen Dragonborn in his heart before turning around to fight the other abyssal monsters, who, at this moment, were still killing his other guild members, whom his close friend, Cephas, had fought so hard to protect. From within the chaotic battlefield, two dwarves would appear from time to time, unleashing sneak attacks that aimed at the vital points of their targets. Sometimes they succeeded, sometimes they didn't. But whenever one of them failed, the other would come to the other's rescue without hesitation. They were none other than Sid and Scarlet, who had also become high rankers. Currently, they were doing their best to eliminate the Empyrean-ranked monsters, who were only a rank below the Calamity rank. Both of them knew their limitations, so they didn't target the ones who had a higher rank than theirs. Besides, the Alliance had Saints and other Calamity-ranked monsters who would deal with these powerhouses themselves. Both assassins had taken their Damper and Cambion forms, unleashing their full might on the battlefield. Fighting alongside them was none other than the Draconian Kobold, Cadmus, who was now an Empyrean-ranked monster. In the past, he was someone whom Lux couldn't even hope to deal with due to the difference in ranks. But now, the half-elf had far surpassed him, leaving him in the dust. Cadmus would be lying if he said that this fact didn't make him feel bitter inside. However, after the Kobold clan had joined Heaven's Gate, They entered a golden age and were able to do whatever they wanted while they dug out an underground nest in the floating island of Edia. With the three of them working side by side, the vanguard of the Alliance was able to breathe a little easier because the trio always targeted the most troublesome monsters on the battlefield. "Cadmus, dodge!" Sid shouted, and the draconian kobold obeyed without a second thought. As soon as Cadmus crouched down, Sid flew past his body and pierced the chest of the monster that was planning to sneak attack the draconian kobold from behind. After this exchange, the two returned to fighting their opponents. They didn't have to thank each other. If they were to do it, they would have already said it more than 100 times already. In the midst of a battle where one could lose their life in a heartbeat, repeatedly thanking each other was pure madness. Suddenly, the three sensed a presence approaching them which made their faces turn pale. "Everyone, back away!" Cadmus roared before unleashing a dragon breath in front of him. The breath attack incinerated the abyssal monsters that were unlucky enough to be in its path. However, his attack was suddenly dispersed by a winged black tiger who had the rank of a demigod. **T. Cadmus cursed internally as the demigod lunged in his direction with its jaws opened wide. Just as the draconian kobold thought that its time had come, something black leaped above his head and clashed with the winged black tiger, engaging it in close combat. It was none other than the Strigoi, who was now one of Lux's Covenant members, Andres. The winged black tiger and the black werewolf faced each other, forcing the other creatures around them to distance themselves from the battle. A fight between two demigods could accidentally kill anyone within their vicinity. Their attacks were simply that powerful. Cadmus opened his draconic wings and flew away with Sid and Scarlet, who also had wings that allowed them to fly. It was then that they saw Gerhardt rampaging in the distance, seeming to have abandoned any form of defense. They knew that the half-elf was a more sensible fellow, so seeing him act like this was unbecoming of him. However, when they saw that these flying monsters were targeting their guild headquarters, the three of them didn't hesitate to defend it with their lives on the line. Keen, who had a pale expression on his face, flicked the handle of his sword from his scabbard, creating countless clicking sounds. The lower-ranked monsters in front of him were all cut in half, but a single glance was enough to tell them that he was about to reach his limit. "Keen, go back to the guild headquarters and rest," Cadmus said as he flew beside the wyvern that was carrying Keen. "We'll take it over from here." The swordsman hesitated for a moment before nodding his head. Sensing its master's mood, the wyvern flew back towards their guild headquarters, while Cadmus, Sid, and Scarlet took over the place he was protecting. Sid, whose eyes were very sharp, noticed a group of people near their guild headquarters. Several dead bodies were laid side by side, with some of them not having complete body parts. He had seen several acquaintances, including Cephas, whom he had met in the past. Sid wasn't that close with the Dragonborn, but he knew that he and Gerhardt were rivals. He now understood why the green-haired half-elf seemed hellbent on killing as many abyssal monsters as he could. It was so that they would accompany Cephas to the afterlife. The Void battlefield had its own rules, so those who died in this place would not have their souls sent to the abyss. But Sid didn't have the time to dwell on this matter because the intensity of the monster attacks that were heading in their direction was steadily increasing. Suddenly, several Empyrean-ranked winged serpents that were over a kilometer long unleashed their breath attacks at the floating island of Edia. The magic cannons mounted on the floating island were the most destructive weapons on the battlefield, second only to Poseidon's main cannons. Because of this, the abyssal monsters were targeting it fiercely, but there were several undead creatures that were getting in their way. The Night Gaunt, Shax, and the Dragon Knight, Bedivere, blocked 2 of these breath attacks, leaving the other attacks to their companions. Cadmus dealt with one of the breath attacks with his own, nullifying them completely. Lazarus unleashed a barrage of spells, stopping the other attacks from landing on their guild headquarters, making everyone breathe a sigh of relief. After what had happened to Cephas, a few of Lux's named creatures and Covenant members prioritized defending their base to help decrease the number of casualties of the main guild members. Below the floating island, a Death Sovereign charged fearlessly at a horde of abyssal creatures. Diablo's long cape fluttered in the wind as he swung his sword sideways. Hellfire Annihilation. A blazing crescent blade flew toward his enemies, cleanly slicing them all in half. Countless lives were being lost with each passing minute, so Diablo's attacks were getting stronger and stronger. The golden eyes that were glowing brightly from his visor showed his determination as he held himself back from assisting Lux in his fight against Daniel. The half-elf had asked him to fight on the front lines and annihilate those who opposed him. As a demigod monster, he was truly a terror on the battlefield, reaping countless lives with a single swing of his sword. However, just as he was about to continue his one-sided massacre, something unexpected happened. The gigantic silhouette of the outer god slowly opened its eyes. The earth turtle, who had merged with the floating island, moved its body sideways in order to avoid the beam of light that was directed at it. Half a minute later, it unleashed a beam of light directed at the floating island of Edia, catching everyone by surprise. The earth turtle, who had merged with the floating island, moved its body sideways in order to avoid the beam of light that was directed at it. Due to how sudden the attack of the outer god was, none of the defenders were able to react to it right away. Sid subconsciously held Scarlet's hand and used his body to protect her, but it was useless. The attack instantly vaporized the two of them as it continued its trajectory toward the target that Daniel had ordered the silhouette to attack. From within the guild headquarters, a brilliant light collided with the beam attack from the outer god, making Kai, who was within the guild headquarters, burst into tears. "I'm sorry, Rose," Keen said softly as he drew his blade for the last time, using his life in exchange for a miracle. Grand Void. Keen unleashed the final stance of his sword art, which was said to have the power to split the void in half. The beam attack was split into two, hitting the left and right parts of the floating island, making the earth turtle roar in pain. In a span of a few seconds, half of the floating island was destroyed, but the town and the guild headquarters remained intact. Keen, who had bravely used his life to block the attack, slowly turned into particles of light. However, before he completely disappeared, he glanced in Lux's direction before closing his eyes. "I leave the rest to you." A moment later, he disappeared, and a cry filled with anger and pain reverberated on the battlefield. "Daniel!" Lux roared in anger, while the pseudo-god laughed. He knew that Lux cared about his friends and allies, so he specifically targeted the floating island of Edia to anger his opponent, who was charging through his abyssal army in order to reach his location. Back in Espor Frieden, in the residence built near the roots of the World Tree, the sound of something breaking spread in the living room as the second high priestess of the Rowan tribe dropped the teacup in her hand. Rose stared blankly in space, while Laura and Livia, who were seated beside her, panicked because the hot tea had spilled into the high priestess' clothes, but the latter seemed lost in thoughts and didn't pay any attention to it. "Sister Rose, are you all right?" Laura asked as she hurriedly used her handkerchief to wipe the priestess' dress. "What's wrong?" Livia asked, as she imitated her sister and helped clean the clothes that had been drenched by the hot tea. While the two girls were doing this, their two baby slimes, Nora and Cora, absorbed the pieces of the shattered teacup, preventing anyone from stepping on them by accident. "Nothing," Rose replied after regaining her composure. "I'm fine. I just felt tired all of a sudden." Laura and Livia nodded their heads in understanding. "Sister, you're not getting enough sleep as of late," Laura said. "You should sleep early tonight." "Are you worried about Brother Keen?" Livia inquired. "Don't worry. Our brother is with him. Both of them are strong." "That's right." Laura nodded. "Big Brother promised that he would return to us safely, and he never breaks his promise. He will beat the bad guys and come back to us like he always does after a mission."
Yes.
Livia stated. "Before Brother Keen left, he asked us if we wanted to be the flower girls in your wedding. Of course, we accepted. Right, Laura?" Laura nodded. The second high priestess of the Rowan tribe reached out to hold the two little dwarves close to her and held them tight. "Right," Rose said as her eyes moistened, as she did her best to hold back the tears that were about to fall. "They will return to us." The young lady's body shuddered uncontrollably, failing to hold back her tears. Laura and Livia hugged Rose tightly and kept on telling her that everything was going to be all right. Rose didn't reply and simply hugged the two girls, who weren't aware of what was happening in the void battlefield. As a seer, the High Priestess suddenly received a vision that shook the very core of her being. She had seen how Sid had tried to protect Scarlet before the two of them died from the Outer God's attack. But that wasn't the main reason why her heart was currently breaking right now. "I'm sorry, Rose." Keynes's voice, which was filled with sadness and regret, played over and over again inside her head. Even in his last moments, he thought of her, making the tears in her eyes fall endlessly. She had lost someone who was very dear to her, and her heart felt as if a black hole had appeared, sucking out all the happiness and hope that she had for the future. As she held the two dwarves, who had also lost their brother in the war, Rose closed her eyes and prayed. She prayed to any god that could hear her prayers, hoping that the person that she had lost would once again return to her and keep his promise to spend his lifetime with her, making her happy for the rest of her life. The floating island of Edia slowly retreated as the Earth Turtle did its best to save everyone. Since it was now part of the floating island, it was in pain after a large chunk of it was destroyed. Unfortunately, the abyssal creatures had no plans of letting them escape, so they all swarmed the floating island with the intention of finishing it off for good. Suddenly, countless shadow warriors emerged as Draven made his appearance. It had been fighting alongside his comrades on the ground when the floating island was attacked. Now that it was facing the united assault of the Abyssal Legion, the Shadow Sovereign of Lux's army stood at the front to defend it. With the Abyssal army's massive numbers, it was inevitable that several monsters would get past Draven's defenses. "Transcendent Fireball," Grandma Annie shouted, unleashing a fireball empowered by the transcendent flames that was bestowed upon her. "Annie, go back inside the guild headquarters," Randolph shouted as he swung his hammer at a demonic imp, sending it flying. "We'll handle it from here, so go back." Transcendent flames covered Randolph's hammer as he fought side by side with Annie, who was protecting the entrance of their guild headquarters. "I can't back down here, Randolph," Grandma Annie replied. "We're the last line of defense, so we can't allow anyone else to get past us." High above their heads, two wyverns descended. Their claws were ready to shred the two dwarves who were trying to hold their ground against the invading enemies. But when they were only several meters away from their targets, 6 puppets blocked their paths and hacked off their wings, resulting in a bloody scene. Vera, who was one of the protectors of the guild headquarters, was manipulating hundreds of her battle puppets at the same time. She was a saint, and a very powerful one at that, but the sheer numbers of enemies that were attacking them were countless, pushing her back. Even so, she didn't back down and moved her fingers as if she were a conductor in an orchestra that was playing the song of the end of the world. All the members of Heaven's Gate desperately held their ground in order to protect their headquarters from the enemies. Bentley and Glee fought side by side, hurling spells and blast bombs left and right. The four-winged dragon of their merchants' guild roared above their heads and unleashed a breath attack at the enemies that seemed unending. "Charge!" General Garrett ordered as he and his men charged forward. Over 10,000 soldiers under his command, including the soldiers that Lux had turned into crystal statues in the past, all advanced to engage their enemies. Within the void battlefield, the island of Edia was like a floating beacon, where countless spells exploded left and right, illuminating the darkness. "Annie!" Randolph shouted as an Empyrean dread scorpion pierced the older woman's body with its stinger. "You bastard!" Randolph roared in anger as tears streamed down the side of his face. Although the monster was stronger than him, he charged at it with the intention of killing it with his own hands. The dread scorpion flung the body of Grandma Annie in Randolph's direction as if mocking him. The blacksmith of Leaf Town couldn't possibly ignore this provocation and released the hammer in his hands, in order to catch the woman that he had loved for many years. They had been together since they were young, but his indecisiveness led to him being unable to tell her his real feelings. Randolph landed safely on the ground as he held the old lady in his arms. She was no longer breathing. The scorpion's stinger had pierced her heart, killing her instantly. Tears blurred Randolph's vision as he held his beloved tightly. He knew that doing something like this in the middle of battle was equivalent to giving up on his life. However, he just stood there as he used his hands to close Grandma Annie's eyes, who could no longer see anything. A shadow fell over the dwarf's body, making Randolph raise his head to look at the dread scorpion, who had moved closer to him. "Annie, I will be with you soon," Randolph said as he held the woman in her hands tighter. The scorpion's stinger then descended upon the blacksmith's body, piercing his head. Randolph collapsed on the ground, still holding Grandma Annie's body tightly. The Empyrean monster then screeched as it advanced to kill more of the people who belonged to the guild Heaven's Gate. Daniel had given them all a mental command to focus their attention on the floating island and make sure that no one inside it survived. Sedwin, who was now the mayor of Leaf Town, fought with tears streaming down his eyes when he saw his two close friends and fellow dwarves die around him. They didn't want to fight any wars and only wished to live in peace. But someone didn't wish for that to happen and only wanted to destroy their world. Because of this, they were forced to fight, putting their lives on the line for a future where the living would not have to fight anymore. He heard Lillian's shout of rage not far from him as she shredded all the monsters around her to pieces. Behind her, countless small monster cores, the size of nails and covered with a gooey substance, littered the ground. These were the remains of the countless baby slimes who refused to seek shelter and fought alongside their masters in battle. The Wicked Queen Slime's rage was the same rage that burned in the hearts of all the guild members of Heaven's Gate, who fought tooth and nail against the abyssal monsters who had killed their family, friends, lovers, comrades, and acquaintances. Diablo charged toward the enemies with his cape fluttering behind him, with his sword raised high. Hellfire Annihilation. A single swing of his sword annihilated countless lives. With so many dead people and monsters on the battlefield, even the demigods would not survive a single sword slash from him. Rage Smash. All Might roared as he punched forward, creating a giant blazing fist that flew forward, instantly obliterating anything in its way. Rage that wouldn't subside. Rage that would not stop until all their enemies were destroyed. Rage that empowered each of their attacks, carrying the weight of the lives of the people who had fallen in battle. Although Diablo and Asmodeus could have reanimated the bodies of Grandma Annie and Randolph, they didn't do that. Just like their master, these two dwarves were so precious in their hearts that they couldn't bear to turn their bodies into zombies in order to fight again. Blackfire was fighting side by side with Lux, so the Black Coffin was unable to gather the bodies of the people who were dying at their guild headquarters. Because of this, Diablo had summoned several Doom Knight gangbangers to take their bodies back inside the guild headquarters. "Those who want to die, step forward," Asmodeus shouted as he summoned his own Deus Gigantia, who stood beside the floating island, swatting countless abyssal monsters and turning them to meat paste. A blizzard suddenly engulfed the entirety of the floating island, lowering the visibility of their enemies to just a few meters in front of them. Itaqua had joined the battle, covering the entire island with its domain. Unlike its enemies, all the members of Heaven's Gate were unaffected by the cold and visual obstruction and were able to move within the blizzard perfectly. A 10-meter-tall death tyrant appeared within the blizzard and opened its eyes. It unleashed a barrage of petrification and death rays at the abyssal creatures, turning them into stone, while killing the rest instantly. Not only did Ithaqua and Morpheus become demigods, but the Death Tyrant had also completed its Beholder's legacy. These two creatures fought side by side with Asmodeus and killed their enemies mercilessly. Now that all of Lux's named creatures and Covenant members congregated in the floating islands, the number of their own people dying decreased exponentially, and the abyssal monsters were finally being pushed back. The stench of death filled the air as the undead army took control of the battlefield. Whether the monsters were in the sky or the land, there was no escaping the verdict of death that Diablo and the rest of his comrades had set on the heads of their enemies. Now that Daniel was facing the half-elf in battle, he could no longer keep his attention on the floating island, which had become a complete slaughterhouse to the abyssal monsters who dared to touch the reverse scale of Lux's undead legion.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.